They said, "Stay in the lounge, Grandma. We'll come back for you after check-in." I nodded. Of course I did. That's what you do when your son talks to you in that tight, overly patient voice. The one they save for old folks, slow folks, and folks they wish weren't there. I sat where they told me to sit, right between a dusty fake ficus and a crying baby, underneath a television nobody was watching. Some weather channel. Storm warnings somewhere far away. It was 9:15 in the morning. I waited 8 hours. I had packed 3 days early. Laid every outfit across the bed the way I used to do for Darnell's school field trips. Pressed each blouse. Folded each pair of slacks. The tickets were to Cancun, our big family vacation, as Monique liked to call it. She'd ordered matching shirts for the kids and me. Mine said Nana's first Valkyrie in hot pink cursive. I didn't care for it, but I wore it anyway. You learn to pick your battles when you've been picking them for 77 years. At the airport, Monique rolled her eyes when she saw the foil-wrapped sweet potato hand pies I'd tucked into my carry-on. "They have food on the plane, Estelle," she said, like I didn't know that. Like I hadn't flown before she was born. At security, things started feeling sideways. Monique kept checking her phone. Darnell wouldn't look at me. The grandchildren had their heads buried in screens, not even pretending to care. When the TSA agent asked about our seating arrangement, Monique let out a laugh, too quick, too bright, and said, "Oh, we'll sort all that out later." That was the last time any of them looked me in the eye. Once we got through security, Monique turned to me with that brittle smile she keeps loaded like a weapon. "Mom, why don't you just stay here in the lounge? We'll go check the bags, get the kids' boarding passes sorted, and come right back for you. Just relax. You've done enough." She patted my arm. It wasn't affection. It was dismissal. The kind of touch that says sit down and stay quiet. So I sat. And I waited. I watched them disappear into the crowd like smoke through a screen door. After an hour, I stood up and paced near the window. After 2, I asked the front desk to page Darnell. No answer. By the 4th hour, I stopped looking toward the entrance. People came and went around me. Flights announced and departed. The woman across from me had lunch, made 2 phone calls, and left with her rolling bag clicking behind her. I stayed. It wasn't until 5 o'clock that I walked to the front desk and asked for help. I gave Darnell's full name. The clerk typed it in, paused, and looked at me with the kind of careful expression people use when they don't want to be the one delivering bad news. "They checked in for the 1:45 flight to Cancun, ma'am. It's already departed." I asked her to say it again. She did, slowly this time. Her voice was kind. I remember that. So that was it. They boarded without me. Not by accident. Not by oversight. I knew my son. He was a lot of things, but careless wasn't one of them. This was a plan. And I had sat there like a fool, waiting to be collected like luggage nobody claimed. I stepped into the restroom, locked the stall, and sat down. Not to cry. I didn't have it in me. I just needed a place where nobody would ask if I was all right. Because I wasn't. And I didn't want to explain that to a stranger in an airport. When I came out, the terminal had shifted into that quiet evening hum. The rush was over. I walked to the departure board and stared at it. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. I just looked at the list the way a woman looks at a menu when she's already decided she's hungry. And then I saw it. Memphis. 7:35 p.m. I don't know why I picked Memphis. Maybe because I hadn't been there in decades. Maybe because it was where my grandmother taught me how to make biscuits from scratch in a kitchen so small you could touch both walls. Maybe because it was the furthest thing from Cancun I could find. I walked to the counter. "1 ticket to Memphis," I said. "Tonight." The young woman hesitated. "Round trip?" "No. One way." I used my own card. From my own account. The one Darnell didn't know about. The one I'd kept open since before his wedding, tucked away like a secret only I needed. I had just enough for the fare, a motel room, and maybe a beginning. I turned off my phone. No messages. No missed calls. Of course not. The boarding was quiet. Nobody asked why I was traveling alone. Nobody looked at my shirt. I'd taken it off in the bathroom and stuffed it in the trash, Nana's first Valkyrie, crumpled up like the lie it was. I boarded in my undershirt and cardigan, and I didn't care. On the plane, I watched the city lights fall away beneath me. 8 hours ago, I thought I was going to paradise. Turns out, I was just being left behind. But now I was going somewhere real. Somewhere they couldn't follow. Somewhere I chose. I landed in Memphis just after 10. The airport was quieter than I expected. Smaller somehow. Or maybe it was me who had gotten smaller, folded in from the weight of a day no woman should have to carry. I walked slowly through the terminal. Not because of my age. Because I didn't need to rush anymore. Nobody was waiting for me. And for once, that felt like freedom. Outside, the air hit me warm and thick. A summer rain had just passed through, and the whole city smelled like wet pavement and magnolia. I stood under the awning and just breathed. Then I found a bench and sat down with my carry-on. The same brown leather bag Darnell had laughed at for being old school. Curtis gave it to me for our 25th anniversary. Real leather, worn soft at the corners. Curtis would have laughed at what happened today. That deep, knowing laugh of his. The one that said, "Well now, sweetheart, what did you expect from that boy?" I didn't expect this. Not really. But I also wasn't surprised. And that was the saddest part. I opened my wallet. 2 cards, 1 ID, $76 in cash, and a folded scrap of paper with an address I hadn't looked at in 50 years. 1849, Quinn Street. My first apartment after marrying Curtis. I didn't know if the building still stood. I didn't even know why I'd brought the address. But there it was, like a breadcrumb I'd left for myself a lifetime ago. I called a cab. The driver was quiet. A blessing. I gave him the address of a motel I'd looked up before leaving Wilmington, just in case. Just in case of what? I hadn't known then. Now I did. We pulled up to a tired 2-story building with a buzzing sign out front. I paid, took my key, and climbed the narrow stairs to room 207. The hallway smelled like pine sol and old prayers. Inside, the room was small but clean. 1 bed, 1 chair, a TV bolted to the wall like it might try to escape. I washed my face, laid down in my clothes, and pulled the scratchy blanket up to my chin. I slept without dreams. The next morning, I stood at the window watching a woman in a housecoat walk her dog. She looked about my age, maybe stronger in the back. I made coffee in the little machine on the nightstand and sat in the stiff chair by the window, sipping slow. Nobody called. Nobody texted. I didn't check. I had nowhere to be. That was a strange thing to realize. For decades, my time had belonged to everyone else. To Darnell, to Curtis, to the grandchildren, to church committees and school fundraisers and doctor's appointments nobody drove me to. But now, for the first time in longer than I could remember, my time was mine. At 9, I left the motel and walked into the neighborhood. My legs ached. My hip was talking. But I kept going. I stopped at a corner bakery and bought a biscuit. A real one, flaky and warm. The woman behind the counter smiled when I handed over exact change. "You're not from around here, are you?" she asked. "I used to be. A long time ago." "Well," she said, "welcome back." I didn't know if I was back. I wasn't sure I belonged anywhere. But the words felt warm, like a quilt someone left out for you without being asked. I asked her where I might find a room to rent. She pointed to a corkboard by the door. I scanned the notes: dog walking, used bike, music lessons, and then one stopped me cold. Room for rent. Quiet lady preferred. Private room. Shared kitchen. House safe. Near bus. No nonsense. No drama. $400 per month. Call Pearline. It was written in blocky no-nonsense handwriting. the kind belonging to a woman who meant exactly what she said. I took a photo of the number. By noon, I'd walked 2 more blocks and found a park bench in the sun. I called. The voice that answered was raspy, skeptical, and as warm as sandpaper. Yeah. I'm calling about the room for rent. Long pause. How old are you? 77. You clean? Yes. No boyfriends, right? I chuckled. Not in a long time. Well, she said, come by at 4. 2185 East Stafford. Bring cash for the first week. Then she hung up. I wrote the address on a napkin. At 4 o'clock sharp, I stood in front of a faded yellow house with a sagging porch and a wind chime that sounded like someone tapping spoons on a Sunday morning. Pearline opened the door with a cigarette in one hand and a fat orange cat curled around her ankles. You the old lady? She asked. I suppose I am. She stepped aside. Come in, then. Let's see if we can tolerate each other. Pearline's house smelled like lavender oil and fried onions. Not unpleasant, just lived in, the way a house smells when a woman cooks real meals and doesn't apologize for the grease. She led me through a narrow hallway lined with stacked books and old Jet magazines, into a small sitting room where the TV was on mute. A crocheted blanket lay folded on the arm of the sofa. The walls had framed photos, some faded, some newer, of people I didn't know yet but somehow already recognized. Church folks. Family. The kind of faces you see in every black woman's living room across the South. Rooms upstairs, she said, gesturing with her cigarette. I followed her up the creaky steps, one hand on the banister. The hallway at the top was dim, paint chipped in places. She opened the last door. This is it. Small. A twin bed, a nightstand, a dresser that had survived more decades than me. But the window was wide, and the afternoon sun poured in like it had been waiting. There was a little desk with a chair that leaned slightly to the left. It's fine, I said. 400 a month, but I take it weekly. 100 a week. Cash. No checks, no credit cards, no sob stories. She looked me over. You don't seem like the sob story type. No, I said. Not anymore. She nodded like that was the right answer. Kitchens shared. Bathrooms down the hall. No guests without warning. I like quiet. You cause trouble, you're out. We clear. Crystal. She handed me a key. You can stay tonight if you've got the first week. I pulled 5 20s from the envelope tucked in my coat pocket and placed them in her hand. She folded the bills without counting. You hungry? I could eat. Pearline made grilled cheese sandwiches on cast iron and heated tomato soup on the stove. Not from a can, from a jar she'd put up herself. We ate at the small kitchen table under a ceiling fan that wobbled like it had opinions. She didn't ask me any questions, which was a mercy. People always ask too soon, before you're ready to say it out loud. She only said one thing. I hate eating alone. And I understood that better than she knew. After dinner, I unpacked in my little room. 3 changes of clothes, a toothbrush, my blood pressure pills, and an old paperback I'd never finished. I folded each item into the dresser like it mattered. Maybe it did. That night, I lay in the narrow bed listening to the sounds of a house that wasn't mine. The ticking of a wall clock. The groan of settling wood. Pearline's voice, low and soft, talking to the cat like he understood every word. Nobody called. Nobody texted. I didn't turn the phone on. And in the morning, I made coffee before Pearline was up. The kitchen felt more like home than my own house in Wilmington ever did. Maybe because this kitchen didn't belong to people who only remembered me when they needed something. By the 3rd day, I started walking the neighborhood like I owned it. 2 blocks down from Pearline's, there was a little diner on the corner with a chalkboard sign out front. Help wanted. Morning shift. Apply inside. I stood there for a moment. I hadn't worked in 15 years. But I was no stranger to early mornings and hot coffee. I'd been pouring cups and plating food since before Darnell could walk. Inside, the place was simple. 3 booths, a long counter, a few bar stools with cracked red cushions that had seen better presidencies. A young girl in an apron was wiping the counter with more attitude than effort. She looked up, surprised. "You hiring?" I asked. "You want to apply?" "Yes," she called toward the back. A sturdy woman with locks pulled into a high bun came through the kitchen door. Her name tag read Denise. "You got experience?" she asked, arms crossed. "I raised 3 kids, ran a household for 50 years, buried a husband, and never once burned a pot of grits. I can make coffee, carry plates, and I don't call in sick." She stared at me for a long beat, then shrugged. "Trial shift tomorrow. 6 to 11. You make it through, we'll talk." That night, I ironed the only blouse I had that still held a crease. I went to bed early and stared at the ceiling. It had been less than a week since the airport. Less than a week since I'd been left behind like a bag nobody wanted to carry. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was walking, working, beginning. And nobody needed to know. Not yet. This life, this quiet, new, unexpected life, was mine. The diner smelled like burnt toast and old hope. I arrived at 5:45, 15 minutes early. The front door was locked. A man with thick glasses and a flour-dusted apron opened it without a word. He grunted something that might have been good morning and disappeared into the kitchen. Denise arrived 10 minutes later, travel mug in one hand, keys jangling on a beaded lanyard. She unlocked the register and tossed me an apron. Hair tied back. No perfume. Refill cups before they ask. And if somebody leaves less than $1 tip, that's on you, not them. I nodded. She looked me over. "You nervous?" "No," I said. "I'm 77. I've buried a husband, raised a son who forgot my birthday 3 years running, and survived 5 colonoscopies. This is just coffee." Denise snorted. "Fair enough." By 7, the first wave came in. Construction workers, nurses coming off night shift, old men who'd been sitting in the same booth since Reagan. I moved slow but steady. I remembered orders, poured coffee without spilling, and smiled without overdoing it. By 9, I had a rhythm. "Where'd they dig you up?" one of the regulars asked, grinning. "Same place they find everything worth keeping," I said. "Back shelf, under a blanket." He laughed and left a $5 tip. Denise watched everything. She didn't say much, just nodded once after the morning rush cleared and handed me a clean towel. We finished at 11. She poured herself another cup, then pointed to the stool beside her. "Sit." I did. "You did fine. You'll get better." She sipped. "You're hired. Minimum wage plus tips. No health insurance. But you work steady. I'll give you every weekday morning." "That enough?" "It's more than enough." We sat quiet for a moment. "You got kids?" she asked. I paused. "They're traveling." She nodded slowly. "They always are." I walked back to Perline's with sore feet and a strange lightness in my chest. She was out front pulling weeds in a faded t-shirt that read "Don't talk to me before coffee." "You get the job," she called without looking up. I did. "Told you. They need people who actually show up." That night, we ate frozen pot pies and watched the news on mute. The cat, whose name I'd learned was Franklin, curled up between us like he'd been waiting for a third. "You staying long?" Perline asked during a commercial. "I don't know. You can. Long as you pay rent and don't hog the remote." "I don't even like the remote." She smiled and passed me the last cookie. Later, I sat on the edge of my bed holding my phone. I hadn't turned it on in days. I thought about checking, seeing if Darnell had noticed yet. I didn't. Instead, I pulled out the paperback I'd brought and opened it to the first page. The desk lamp cast a soft glow against the walls. Outside, rain tapped gently at the glass. Inside, I wasn't someone's leftover. I wasn't a burden or a favor or an afterthought. I was a woman with a room, a job, a plate of food, and a quiet chair of her own. It was enough. The first paycheck was small, $74.26 after taxes. Denise handed it to me in a thin envelope at the end of Friday's shift. "Cash it or frame it," she said. I smiled and tucked it into my coat pocket. I wasn't used to holding money that was purely mine. 4 years, everything I earned or saved went to someone else. Groceries for Darnell's family. Birthday gifts that never got a thank you. Co-pays for appointments nobody drove me to. But this was different. I'd earned this on my own 2 feet, apron tied, hands steady, back straight. I walked to the bank on 3rd and cashed the check. The young teller looked at me like she wasn't sure I understood what I was doing. "10s and 5s, please," I said. "1s for the rest." She handed me the bills. I folded them neatly into my wallet and walked out with my chin a little higher than when I walked in. Across the street was a second-hand shop, nothing fancy, just a narrow storefront with a cluttered window and a handwritten sign. "Fall specials, 20% off coats." I stepped inside. The bell on the door tinkled soft. A girl barely out of high school smiled at me from behind the counter. "Looking for something in particular?" "Yes," I said. "Something that makes me feel like myself again." She didn't laugh. Just nodded and started pulling things from the rack. I chose a navy wool coat with a herringbone pattern and deep pockets. It wasn't new, but it was warm and solid and well made. I tried it on. It fit like it had been waiting for me on that rack, holding its shape until I showed up. When I paid in cash, the girl wrapped it in tissue like it was a gift. "You look sharp," she said. "Thank you. I feel sharp." That night, I walked home in my new coat. Just cold enough to justify it. Pearline was on the porch with Franklin, sipping red wine from a coffee mug. "Where you been?" she asked. "Bought a coat." She whistled. "Look at you. Classy lady. Only on Fridays." We went inside and split a can of chili. The heater buzzed. The floor creaked under Pearline's heavy slippers. It was noisy the way old houses are, a kind of comforting noise, like a body you've lived in long enough to know by sound. Later, I stood in front of the mirror in my room. Turned left, then right. Ran my hand along the wool. It wasn't just a coat. It was proof. I was still here. Still standing. Still capable of choosing something for myself. For once, nobody else had a say. The phone stayed off. I didn't miss it. I missed people sometimes, but not the kind who leave you beside a fake plant at an airport and never look back. Mornings, I worked. By noon, I walked. In the evenings, I read or sat through Pearline's rants about city politics and church gossip. Every few days, I bought myself something small. Wool socks, a crossword book, real tea bags instead of the dusty ones Pearline kept in a tin above the fridge. I was beginning to understand something. There was a life here. Not a grand one, but a good one. And it belonged to me. By the second week, the ache in my feet faded. My hands remembered how to carry plates without a wobble. I could clear a 4-top in under 2 minutes. Denise still didn't say much, but one morning she slid a cinnamon roll wrapped in foil across the counter. "Too many," she muttered. "Take one." That was her way of saying I belonged. I settled into a rhythm. Monday through Friday, mornings at the diner. Saturdays, long walks through neighborhoods I didn't know yet. Sundays, rest. Pearline didn't hover. She didn't ask where I went or why I came back late. She just grunted when I walked in and poured me something from a box. One evening, she came through the door with a stack of mail. "Something for you," she said, tossing an envelope onto the table. No return address. Just my name, in a familiar looping script. I stared at it before opening. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper. "Grandma," it read. "Where are you?" I didn't need to see the name. I knew the handwriting. Amara. My oldest grandchild. The only one who ever visited without being told to. The only one who once spent a whole Saturday afternoon helping me plant roses in the backyard, then named each bush after a Motown singer. The letter was short. Just a few lines. Dad and Monique are losing it. They said you disappeared. Nobody's heard from you. I've been checking every day. I miss you. Please let me know you're okay. A phone number at the bottom. A new one. I sat with the letter in my lap, reading it twice. Then I folded it carefully and tucked it into my nightstand drawer. I didn't call. Not yet. But something inside me softened. Like a door I'd bolted shut, cracking open just wide enough to let the light in. The next day at the diner, Denise said, "You got a visitor." I turned. A man stood just inside the door, early 80s, neatly dressed, clean-shaven, a little unsteady on his feet. When he spotted me, he smiled like he'd been looking for good coffee his whole life. "You the one who knows how to make a real cup?" he asked. I poured him one and set it down. "Cream and sugar?" "Just cream. 2 splashes. Not a drop more." We didn't talk much that first day. He drank slow, read someone's leftover newspaper, and left a tip more generous than necessary. He came back the next day. And the day after that. By Thursday, I knew his name was Otis. Widowed. 2 sons. One in Atlanta, one in DC. We didn't talk about them much. Mostly we talked about birds. He liked blue jays. I liked cardinals. We both agreed crows were smarter than most people gave them credit for. On Friday, he brought a picture of his wife. "Married 43 years, he said. "She made better coffee than this place, but you come close." I smiled and refilled his cup. That evening, I stood by my window watching the wind move through the trees. I thought about Otis's hands wrapped around the mug. Amora's letter. The navy coat hanging on the back of my door. There were still gaps in this new life. Still quiet aches at 3 in the morning. But something was taking shape. Not a return to what I'd lost, but a turning towards something I hadn't known I could find. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. It was freedom. The phone stayed in the bottom drawer of my nightstand, wrapped in a clean handkerchief like something sacred or dangerous. I wasn't sure which yet. Pearline didn't ask. She wasn't the type. But one evening while we shelled peas in the kitchen, she said, "You hiding or healing?" I looked up from the calendar. Both. She nodded once and went back to the peas. It had been 3 weeks. 3 weeks since the airport. Since the lounge chair with the broken armrest. Since the cheap plastic water bottle Darnell pressed into my hand before disappearing with his family. Not a single call had come through. Not one attempt to find me. Except Amara. Every now and then, I opened her letter. The creases were softening from use. Her handwriting reminded me of her mother's. Same long loops, same nervous slant to the right. But I still didn't call. It wasn't punishment. I wasn't cruel. I just wasn't ready to open a door they'd shut without flinching. It takes longer to walk back from silence than it does to fall into it. At the diner, Denise started saving me the crossword from the morning paper. "You look like the type who finishes what she starts," she said. Otis came every day now. Always at 9:10. Always in that same grey jacket. He didn't flirt. Not exactly. But he lingered longer with each visit. Told more stories. Asked more questions. The kind that aren't nosy, just curious. Like he was reading a book and didn't want to skip ahead. One morning he asked, "How come a woman like you is working the breakfast shift in a place like this?" I looked at him over the rim of the coffee pot. Because someone left me in an airport lounge like a bag they didn't want to carry anymore. He blinked. "I'm sorry," he said. And meant it. "Don't be. I got on a better flight." That earned a soft laugh. He reached for his cup, then paused. "You ever think about calling them?" "Every day," I said. "And every day I don't." He didn't press. Just drank his coffee. That night, I turned the phone on. It buzzed like a hornet trapped in a jar. 32 missed calls. 18 messages. The oldest was from Monique, a frantic voicemail from the day they flew out. Estelle, we thought you were in the restroom. Please call us. We're about to board. A lie. Smooth and rehearsed, like she'd practiced it walking to the gate. The rest were more of the same. Darnell's voice, tight and clipped. Where are you, Mom? Then, this isn't funny. Then finally, fine. Do what you want. I didn't respond. But I saved Amara's number. That much I could do. The next morning, she called. I stared at the screen, watched her name blink. And for the first time I answered. Grandma. Her voice cracked like she wasn't sure I'd speak. I'm here, baby. A long pause. You're okay. I'm better than okay. Where are you? Somewhere quiet. Somewhere I chose. She didn't beg. Didn't guilt me. She just said, I'm glad you're safe. I miss you. I miss you too, sweetheart. That was enough for now. No explanations. No apologies. Just the sound of someone who wanted me in her life, not because I baked cakes or babysat on weekends, but because I mattered. And that sound, soft, simple, sincere, meant more than any seat on a plane. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, a letter arrived. Pearline slid it across the kitchen table. The return address was Wilmington. The handwriting was familiar the way a bruise is familiar. You recognize it by the ache it leaves. Darnell. 6 pages of neat, angry script. No greeting. Just, I can't believe you did this. He accused me of disappearing. Of making a scene by absence. Of putting the family through stress during their vacation. Monique cried every night, he wrote. The kids were confused. Do you think that was fair to them? Not a word about the airport lounge. Not a word about asking me to wait. No mention of the 8 hours. Just performance, pain dressed up like concern, facts rewritten like a script. He ended with, we're willing to talk, but only if you're ready to be reasonable. Reasonable. Like decades of cooking, cleaning, babysitting, paying their bills, and being told where to sit and when to shut up had been unreasonable. Like disappearing was a tantrum and not a choice. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Pearline didn't ask what it said. She passed me a plate of toast and nodded toward the window. Storm's coming, she said. It was. That night, I lit a match and fed the letter to the kitchen sink, flame by flame. Pearline didn't flinch. I would have used the fire pit, she said. More satisfying. The next morning, Amara called again. I heard Daddy wrote to you. He did. You gonna respond? I was quiet a moment. No. Maybe not ever. She didn't argue. I get it. She told me she'd started working at a bookstore. Part-time, low pay. But I like it, she said. Books don't yell at you. We laughed. Easy and warm. You sound different, Grandma, she said. Different how? Lighter. Days later, a manila envelope arrived. Inside, a newspaper clipping from the Wilmington community section. The headline, Missing Matriarch, Family Speaks Out on Grandmother's Disappearance. There was a photo of me from some old family gathering, holding a pie dish, smiling without showing teeth. Darnell was quoted. We're deeply worried. She vanished without a word. We just want her safe. Monique added. She's vulnerable. We fear something happened. She's not the type to do something like this. I laughed out loud. A sharp sound that surprised even me. Not the type. Pearline read over my shoulder. They really said vulnerable? I nodded. You should sue them for underestimating you. They'll have to stand in line. Then the lawyer showed up. A man in a pressed suit, standing outside the diner after my shift. He removed his sunglasses like he was in a movie. Are you Mrs. Estelle Beaumont? I didn't like his tone. Too careful. Too rehearsed. I am. My name is Raymond Caldwell. I represent Darnell and Monique Beaumont. They've asked me to speak with you regarding your well-being and your assets. I blinked. My well-being is excellent. And my assets are none of your business. He shifted. They're very concerned. They'd like to ensure you're in a safe environment. Possibly discuss some next steps. I folded my apron and set it on the counter. Tell Darnell and Monique I am not a pet they forgot to pick up. There are no next steps unless I take them. I walked past him and out the door. Otis was waiting on the sidewalk. He didn't say he'd come for coffee. He said he didn't. You okay? He asked. Yes. Because I'm not going to let anyone convince me I'm not. That evening, I wrote to Monique. 3 lines. I know what you did. I know what you didn't say. I'm not angry. I'm not coming back. Take care of your own life now. I finally started mine. I mailed it with a stamp that had a cardinal on it. The kind of bird that sings even when it's cold. Weeks passed. Pearline turned 70 on a Tuesday. She didn't want to party. People start singing and I want to run, she said. But I baked a chocolate cake and left it on the table with 2 candles and a card that read, "You're not old. You're vintage." She laughed. I guess I can tolerate cake. That night on the porch, wrapped in quilts, we watched the moon rise over Memphis. It was the kind of celebration I never used to think counted. But it did. Maybe more than the loud ones ever had. Then Amara's letter came. No guilt. No pressure. Grandma, I'm coming to Memphis. I want to see you. I'm not bringing anyone. I'll be at the River Bluff Inn on Maple, room 12. Friday and Saturday. If you want to come by, I'll be there. If not, I understand. Friday morning, I dressed carefully. Not for her. For me. Navy coat. Clean blouse. Lipstick the color of dried cherries. I didn't tell Pearline where I was going. She didn't ask. The motel was modest. I knocked once. She opened the door like she'd been standing there with her hand on the knob. She was taller than I remembered. Natural hair pulled back, shadows under her eyes, but the same gentleness in the way she looked at me. Like I was the only thing in the room worth seeing. Hi, Grandma. Hi, sweetheart. She didn't hug me right away. She stepped back and let me in. The room smelled like takeout and hotel soap. The bed was made, but the desk was covered in books. She'd brought books. That said everything. We sat, not too close. Like we both knew we needed space before warmth. I didn't know if you'd come, she said. I didn't either. We talked about everything. Her job. My diner. How freedom tasted when nobody was watching. She said, you were the only person who ever made me feel like enough, just by sitting beside me. I reached over and took her hand. You always were enough. You still are. We didn't cry, but we breathed deeper. Before I left, she handed me a small wrapped package. A book of poems. I underlined the ones that made me think of you, she said. That night, I read them by lamplight. One line stayed with me. There are women who rise, not from fire, but from forgetting who told them they couldn't. I slept with the window cracked, the Memphis air warm and sweet, the sound of wind soft like a second chance. The next morning, I walked to the diner like always. Same coat. Same steps. But something was different. Not around me, in me. Denise handed me a new apron. Deep green with stitched white letters. Not your grandma's kitchen. I laughed loud and full. Otis raised his mug from the corner booth like a salute. That night, I sat on the porch with a pen and a blank card. I wrote, Dear me, you waited so long for someone to save you, you forgot you were the one holding the key. You didn't lose them. They let go. And you finally let go back. Look at the life that opened. Well done. Love, me. I taped it inside my dresser drawer, behind the old recipe cards, just in case I ever forget again. So that's my story. I wasn't abandoned. I was released. And I didn't rebuild my life. I built something brand new. If this found you at the right moment, don't wait for the perfect sign. Be your own sign. Your own noise in the silence. Your own step away from that airport lounge. And when you do, come back and tell me about it. I'll be right here.